Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Common Council to order for this work session. Could we have roll call, please?
Mayor Gates is excused. Vice Mayor Miles.
Here.
Councilmember Kress.
Here.
Councilmember Lingenfelter.
Here.
Councilmember Scott Staley.
Present.
Councilmember Waite.
Here.
Councilmember Yocum.
Good evening.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. All work session items are for discussion only. No action can or will be taken. The primary purpose of the work session meetings is to provide the City Council with the opportunity for in-depth discussion and study of specific subjects. Public comment is not provided for on the agenda and may be made only as approved by consensus of the Council. In appropriate circumstances, a brief presentation may be permitted by a member of the public or another interested party on an agenda item if invited by the mayor or city manager to do so. The mayor may limit or end the time for such presentations. Our first work session topic is the Neighborhood Services Overview.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Miles. Tonight, as part of kind of what we're planning on having be kind of an annual report on some of the services, we are going to have two of probably the most important services that we provide, and we're going to kick it off with code services, and so I'll turn the time over to the police department to cover that.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor and Council, we appreciate you allowing us to be here today to further describe what the Neighborhood Services Division does. My name is David Reif. I'm a sergeant with the Kingman Police Department, and this is Code Enforcement or Neighborhood Services Officer Sam Kurtz. We will kind of be tag teaming this and hopefully present the information to you and or be able to answer some of the questions that you may have. Their primary assignment is to enforce codes and ordinances that are adopted by City Council. Those codes are specific more so to Chapter 7-165, and they fall under some other categories as well. We're going to be talking about nuisance codes today and not animal-related calls for service or animal-related codes. We're dealing with violations affecting the quality of life, and we need to be proactive in nature because if we're not proactive, a lot of crimes and all of those issues are going to go unreported by their surrounding neighbors. They are simply dealing with that blight for a number of years, a number of months, a number of weeks, and we need to step in. I once had a code enforcement officer say that he or she had problems making contact with the general public. Because of the nature of the job description, we need to. And the way that I portrayed it to that person is we are their voice. We are their spokesperson, and we're trying to make a more picturesque community. One property at a time, one street at a time, and or one beat area at a time. Is it a challenge? Absolutely. It's an uphill battle daily because as people come into compliance, they immediately fall out of compliance as well. And we're going to talk about some key components. The nuisance codes deal with animals, number one. Weeds and junk and debris are our primary areas that we deal with. We are also working with the fire department as well as zoning to identify key areas of a responsibility. The code enforcement is an all-inclusive division for the most part. However, each division on its own has the ability to enforce those rules and regulations set forth by the city, by statutes or by ordinances. And oftentimes, because they are quote-unquote code enforcement, whether it be a building department issue or a zoning issue, it falls on the code enforcement's lap, when in actuality it's kind of a shared venture in dealing with those violations. So hopefully today we'll have a better understanding of that. Councilmember Staley, you had mentioned about specific to storage containers on July 17th a while back. That storage container falls under the building department and also zoning, and not necessarily within the zoning are we necessarily dealing with day to day, although we take it on as a contact. We notify them even though it falls under somebody else's lap. And that causes confusion not only for council, but the general public, as well as what those reporting avenues. The reporting avenues are this. We have several different channels. I'm sorry, I'm used to moving around, so it's different for me to stand in one location. Is the city web and or dispatch, council or self-initiated. Those are the various ways in reporting, and we rely upon those channels heavily. However, those channels at times kind of get muddied because when they believe it to be a code enforcement or a neighborhood services issue, it goes to the wrong division and slows that process down. So I don't know if IT is able to do something with that to build a better reporting format, whereas filling in the checks and blanks section to automatically channel it from one direction to another. Our calls for service are basically 50-50 split. We deal with roughly 3,100 calls per year. Roughly 1,500 of those are animal control related calls. The other 1,500 plus are code enforcement. We strive for voluntary compliance in every case. Do we get voluntary compliance in every case? No, even though we wish we would. We take a proactive approach in dealing with each property that we deal with, in each case that we deal with, because that's part of our mission as a Kingman Police Department. That is our guideline, is being proactive. If we were simply reactionary, we wouldn't get anything done, and it falls outside of the mission of our department. And the number one thing that we need to do is remain consistent in our approach, whether that be a blighted area or whether that be in Rancho Santa Fe. Each time that we deal with a case, it doesn't matter with the social standing, it's dealing with a case. It's dealing with that face-to-face contact preferred, and sometimes it's just simply by mail or otherwise. But we want that face-to-face communication because hopefully we get buy-in for that. The code enforcement, as I talked about, is actually neighborhood services, and we're trying to retitle that job description to neighborhood services, more so than code enforcement, because hopefully that will clarify some of those issues that we deal with of who gets what case and what call for service. Here's our top 10. They're not necessarily in line. Junk, trash, and debris. If you look at the first line, that's I. That is self-initiated calls for service. If you look at the C, that is a complaint-driven. 38% of that call volume is junk, trash, and debris. That doesn't take into account for animal control-related calls. So if you look down that list, whether it be abandoned or junk or inoperable vehicles, the self-initiated activity weighs heavily or outweighs the complaint-driven. And that's what my expectation is as overseeing the code enforcement division or neighborhood services that should be called, is to make sure that there is that self-initiated activity, more so than just complaint-driven. Councilmember Staley, you had specifically spoke to a problem property, which is Dollar General, on July 17th of this past year. On June 26th, we had already started a case on that problem property, and were in communication shortly thereafter with corporate headquarters back east, who is responsible for those cleanup efforts more so than the local area. So you had spoke to reporting avenues. That was already being done. The unfortunate part is there's no way to really report it unless there's or who is interested in what we do daily. So, and I know there is interest, but who do we report, specific activities to? So there's things that are being done on the back end that aren't necessarily being reported. That case was shortly thereafter abated and taken care of from corporate. Is it still meeting some attention? Right now the weeds are actually a little taller than 6 inches in some areas, and that's just one example. The other is we had a car accident or a crash today that a vehicle had ran into a pile of rocks on Rainbow. With that person, he looked to the side to make sure that his daughter was buckled up, and ran into a pile of rocks and stayed there, ultimately reported that crash to us. We end up getting that call for service as I also oversee our traffic division. And from there, we end up contacting the building department and others to make sure that we have a unilateral or a multi-pronged approach to deal with the issues instead of just one division. That falls under zoning as well as the building department. We look at it as a Title 13 or Title 28 violation for traffic, so we can deal with it in many different ways. That driver of that vehicle took a proactive approach and ultimately contacted our agency and therefore was not cited. It was my officer's intention to issue a citation for that offense, but ultimately he was, it rectified itself through voluntary compliance and such. Prohibited signs. We've been dealing with prohibited signs this week. We have taken 24 to 25 signs down that don't meet the setback requirements. That in itself is a zoning issue, not necessarily a code enforcement issue, but because we believe in the proactive approach, we have taken it a step farther and deal with that on the code enforcement level, not necessarily the notification for the violation. That is forwarded to developmental services who will do the notification where they see fit. Aside from that, the signs are dropped off at our Public Works Department where they can be picked up later on and hopefully will be placed back in that specific area, meeting the compliance standards and the setbacks as well as community notification. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Code Enforcement Officer Sam Kurtz to discuss what they do day to day.
Thank you, Sergeant Rife. Good evening, Council. Thank you for letting us be here. I'm just going to go over the top 10 violations that we deal with on a daily basis, not including animal control. So the first one is going to be junk, trash, and debris. And as you can see, I did attach photos to these to give a little bit better of explanation. So the code states that no person shall allow, deposit, store, accumulate, maintain garbage, trash, refuge, rubbish, litter, junk that is visible beyond the lot boundaries. As you can see in this photo, this stuff was placed behind the property. It was a continuous battle with them for months on this property. They'd get it cleaned up right at that 30-day mark. We'd leave the next day, someone would call, complain again, all the stuff was back out there. So it's just month after month, everybody was wondering, hey, can we go through this? Like, they just cleaned it up, now it's back out there, can you just submit it? Unfortunately, no, that's not our process. The rubbish, garbage, can be anything from tree trunks, tree branches, regular household garbage, wood, anything that to the normal person you see in your house, hey, that's trash, that's going to fall under this. And within all of our definitions, it lists under garbage what all those are, refuge, under all that. Next one's going to be junk and abandoned vehicles or inoperable vehicles. With these, code states that in all residential areas, all junk vehicles being stored, restored, or repaired for longer than 10 days shall be kept within a lawful structure or behind a lawful fence, such in a manner not to be seen beyond the lot boundaries. With this, we're basically looking for three major aspects. Operability, if it's registered, because if it's not registered, can't be driven, shouldn't be on the roadway, and if there's flat tires, because right there, it's also going to be inoperable. With a lawful structure, a garage behind a site restrictive fence is where they are permitted to be. And with the city code, you're allowed 3 per lot. So there's people that do have more than that. A lot of times they are hidden behind houses that we can't see. Next one is excessive weeds. As yes, with the monsoons that we just had, these went like wildfire. So, but no owner or occupant of land, whether it improved or unimproved, shall allow weeds to grow in excess of 6 inches height or which is dead, dry, as to constitute a fire hazard. Come the summertime, these things really dry out, single match, these things go. So it's a big concern. So when we see those, we hit it hard. We get told from up above, hey, go out, pound this, get these areas cleaned up, it's getting bad. obstructions. In this one, this happened to be a tree that fell during a storm, completely fell into the roadway. Fortunately, because of the obstruction, we didn't have time to contact a company to come out. We have the tools. We helped this resident out, cut down the limbs, removed it to the side, and they had it removed through the trash department. But definition is no owner or occupant of land, whether improved or unimproved, shall allow trees, shrubs, or plant growth on the land to encroach or impede, obstruct, or interfere with passage on the streets, sidewalks, or alleyway within the city or obstruct visibility of the traffic control device or signal. Now, what it doesn't say in there is over the sidewalk has to be a 7-foot clearing, and over roadway has to be 15 foot of clearance for vehicles to get through. Commercial vehicles. In the photo, you can see that there's a nice big commercial vehicle parked on the side of the residence, which is in violation. In residential zones, it shall be unlawful for any person to park or store, and for any owner or occupant of land to allow, permit any person to store, park on the owner's occupant's land, any commercial vehicle with a gross weight exceeding 13,000 pounds or having dual rear wheels exceeding 17 inches in diameter. This is a big one that we only take on complaints, only because there are a lot of commercial vehicle people that live here that they're just home for the weekend, they're out of here in 2 days. So a lot of people, when they say, hey, I'm just here for the night or so and I'm going to be out of here, we understand that. We all have jobs. We're just trying to make a living. Prohibited signs. No person shall place any sign in any public right-of-way or attach any sign to any public utility structure, traffic control device, traffic light, standard, or similar structure except those permitted by the city of Kingman. Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of you driving around occasionally see yard sale signs attached to city signs. As soon as we see that, we're taking them down, we're taking them to the owner, or we just go and let the owner know at the property, you need to go remove your signs. Typically, we have compliance within minutes. Outdoor sales, except for permitted activities, that should be unlawful for any person to display any article for sale outdoors on property, improved or unimproved, and no owner of the property shall allow such outdoor sales or displays. Most of this, I know a lot of us probably see this at the bowling alley. For them to do that, they actually have to get a license and kind of piggyback off of the bowling alley's property. But you will find them in open lots over there by Gas and Grub on Wallapai Mountain Road, and empty lots. We actually find them a lot. We go up and contact them, and of course, no license, no permit. At that time, they do get shut down. Vehicles parked for sale. No person shall park or permit to be parked any vehicle, boat, ATV, RV, trailer, motorcycle, etc., to be displayed for sale upon any right-of-way, lot, or unimproved property, whether publicly or privately owned, except written consent from the owner of property displayed from dawn until dusk, no more than one vehicle per property. This one is also a zoning ordinance. It's just we're out and about. We can handle it right then and there. A big place that we do get this a lot of is on Wallapai Mountain Road next to Gas and Grub, and at Wallapai Mountain Road and Eastern. With the one right there by Gas and Grub, that property is actually owned by the drilling company that's back behind Gas and Grub. They will actually give the people a card to go put it out there. Unfortunately, no one realizes that there can only be one. At that time, we ask everybody to remove all their vehicles. Outdoor storage, the storage of boats, trailers, campers, etc. shall not be stored or required in front yards, such as storage shall be in a space developed in such a manner as to not be detrimental to surrounding properties. Occasionally, we do see this, people parked in the front yard. There are the designated areas, such as the driveway or in the street in front of their property, that is permitted for them to park. Shopping carts. It is unlawful to remove a shopping cart from the premise of any business or establishment without written permission from manager. This is one that we do deal with quite a bit, and we get a lot of complaints from back up behind the hospital because a lot of people up there don't have vehicles, so they do wheel their groceries or their goods to the residents. They do not return them. We have people up there that in their own want to take care of their neighborhood, contact us. At that time, we contact the stores, let them know right where their carts are, and most of the time they remove them pretty quickly for us.
Before we have questions, I want to discuss some timelines. Neighborhood Services has specific timelines or guidances when they submit a case. If they start a case, say on July 1, by July 31st, that should come in compliance. As of the 1st of August, the following month, that case should be submitted to the City Attorney's Office for review for criminal charges. The quickest way to deal with a case is through voluntary compliance. If we do not get voluntary compliance, from there it is now introduced into the court's hand through criminal charges, and then it can take upwards of 6 months to abate that area, depending upon the court dockets and how that case rolls through the court system. So that's where the voluntary compliance and our interaction and buy-in with the community is really so important to keep it out of that court system and moving along versus seeking that the criminal component of that. If it goes before the court, at that point in time, we kind of have a hands-off approach until we are notified by the city attorney's office to do follow-up investigation to see if they are meeting the requirements and if they are in compliance. So it just furthers that blight even further into the future versus being rectified. And with that, I'd like to open it up for questions.
Thank you, Sergeant Wright. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Vice Mayor, I have 2 questions, please.
Okay.
2 questions. I'll ask them together, and then you can address them however you'd like. The first one is the home you showed with the debris. That happens to be a house I drive by a couple times. And can you just clarify that they do something in 30 days and then 31 days they're back out of compliance and there's not an option? So that's my first question. My second question is, what are you doing about enforcing storage containers at this point in time?
I
Thank
expected
you.
that one to come up. I will address the storage containers first. The storage container is a zoning and a building department issue. They are in the process, and maybe Keith can help me here in a minute if I don't answer it correctly, to possibly revamp either zoning or building regulations to allow those for the city. That's going through council, or I don't know where it's at in process. We have been directed to take a hands-off approach with storage containers. It falls under somebody else's plate. We will not deal with, at this stage, with commercial containers that are on properties. However, whether we have been directed by other divisions or other departments, we have still taken the stance that they are disallowed, and based upon complaint, we will continue to notify that person that is not allowed within the city and therefore needs to be removed. Because if that ordinance doesn't pass or if it isn't changed, now we are part of that problem if we are not addressing it as we move into the future. And I don't want to go back and tell somebody that they have to move or remove a $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 storage container that we have been told to not deal with. So we are still taking that on a complaint basis more so than actively searching those storage containers as because of the stay in that we've been directed by another division.
And when you get clarity on what planning and zoning and ultimately city council decides, then you'll be more proactive in
Yes.
compliance? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. As far as the complaints related to 30 days, let's say that your property next door or within an area that you are familiar with and you drive by there daily. Let's say we address that on July 1st, and they fall within compliance within a short period of time. Typically what will happen in certain areas is they will fall back out of compliance in a certain period of time, whether that be a month or 2, and then we revisit that issue. The code enforcement or neighborhood services are supposed to monitor problem properties that seem to be reoccurring. With 3,000 calls for service, with 4 people, they're pretty busy and tasked with the huge geographical areas. Are there going to be some that are missed? Absolutely. If it falls outside of compliance throughout its entirety, and on that 31st day it is submitted to the city attorney's office for review for criminal charges, at that point in time, it is pushed through the courts. That can take upwards of 6 months or less, and I would imagine that the city attorney can comment if he chose to on that. However, we take a hands-off approach because at that point in time, it's under criminal charges, and that is in the court's hands. The other is let's say if your house that you have a problem with in a surrounding area, each day is an independent violation. So say if you have junk and debris or excess weeds or whatever on your property, for the first 15 days, that in actuality is 15 different violations because each violation is an independent charge. We don't charge it that way. We charge it collectively as a single event more so than each day. I don't know of any case in history that we've charged it each and every day to be in violation unless it's just an extreme, blight. But that's just the way that we look at it. On the 2-week mark after it's submitted, from there, we will look at it and continue it for compliance, just to monitor it, take photographs, and then typically the city attorney's office is really great to work with when it comes to compliance. They will call us within a short period of time to ask if it's in compliance. From there, they will either dismiss the charge through the court process and or continue it for prosecution.
Let me clarify my question. They come into compliance on day 28. They get past the 30-day mark, so day 3 of a new clock, they fall out of compliance again. And does that just continue to happen with no resolution for the neighbors?
It could in theory. Hopefully not. Hopefully through voluntary
Well, it
compliance.
does.
We've had cases such as that, such as a residence on Madison that they're in the court process right now. It falls in and out of compliance continually. We have several properties like that. So they have, the Code Enforcement Division or Neighborhood Services have no way of charging via citation. Everything that they do has to be submitted through the city attorney's office for criminal charges. They cannot rectify a situation through a citation unless it's an animal control related call for service only.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. So maybe kind of building on what we were just talking about. What I hear from the public sometimes is that the city needs to put some teeth in it so that we, have more power in order to make these cleanups happen, or maybe to catch in this situation where it just keeps falling in and out. And so I'm kind of wondering if that's true, if that's what we're missing, or if you feel or anybody feels that this is an effective, do we have an effective system, or do we need to make some improvements in order to fix what sounds like kind of a problem that we're having?
I'd like the city attorney to answer that question.
Yeah, and I think I can jump into that one. The ordinance is a Class 1 misdemeanor, which is the highest we can go. Generally, what will happen is when we'll either do what's an abatement, order an abatement through the court process, or you prosecute them criminally for the misdemeanor charge. But what will happen is, we're not looking to put anybody in jail for this, but what you'll see is a fine being levied, and then generally what we try and do is suspend part of it or all of it to get them to clean up. If they fail during any time they're on probation, there's the ability for us to go in and revoke their probation and ask that fine be paid instead of being suspended. So that's kind of where we're at. And as Dave's saying, we look at trying to get a lot of this. Sometimes we use the big stick, but we're really trying to get them really into that voluntary compliance to make sure everything goes the way it's supposed to go. But there are repeat people, and I'm not sure, how far you're going to go on those properties that are going to be repeating over and over again.
Right.
Like I say, I don't know. We've never put anybody in jail for a nuisance, but, there's always a first for everything too, so.
Right, okay.
Some of what you're fighting too is just the way that person has grown up. It's just normal for that person to live in that type of an environment, which isn't right for the person next to them to reside in that geographical area, looking at the blight. But that's what we're also fighting is what they have grown up with as well in some areas.
Sure. I have one more.
Go ahead.
Do we ever, and I imagine the answer is yes, but do we run into homeowners that they're elderly or they're disabled and they truly can't clean up? And then I see you nodding. Is there a solution? Is there a nonprofit group that we can connect with to help them? What do you guys do when you have somebody that can't get out and pull weeds?
You know, that's a great question, and we've partnered with a lot of different organizations, whether that be local businesses to provide paint or tools, and or different community or church groups to do cleanup efforts. The mayor had requested a church group that she was contacted by that were in the process of starting up just that type of a program. So we try to best match people with services. If it is an issue with just somebody that's just trying to get out of doing work, that's something that we don't necessarily want to pair with somebody because there is no learning curve there. Whereas if there is a medical need or an issue because of age or otherwise, and it might not necessarily be age, it just might be somebody's ability or inability to clean their property. We want to pair them with somebody that can, no matter who that group is. The city has different cleanup, opportunities as well, whether it be, the Paint the House program. I don't know what it's specifically called, but we do a pretty good job at taking care of our own community, and I'm proud to say that.
Good. I'm really happy to hear you say that as well. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Just one simple question. For any of the citizens that may be watching, that maybe they don't know how to contact you, what's the best way for our citizens to contact?
Truly, the easiest way is to contact dispatch. Is if it's a weed or a junk and debris type call, because that's the quickest reporting avenue, especially if it's a weekend or something like that. There's other avenues or reporting mechanisms that are put in play, but sometimes that delays that process. And when we're talking about a 30-day window, and then we ultimately go in and extend it for another 3 to 5 days, depending upon whether it be a weekend, that's just extending that time frame for a report, depending upon the nature of the report to get into us, whether it be going through city council or whether it be going to the city manager's office and or through the city web to report.
Yeah, I'm not sure if are you allowed to give out that number? I mean,
Oh yeah, 928-753-2191.
great, thank you, sir.
Do not call 911 for that.
Right.
Thank you.
Sergeant Wright and Officer Kirk, thank you so much for the information. I think every one of us have had people ask us, how do we report this? So I appreciate knowing where to send them. Thank you very much, and thank you for your work.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you, gentlemen. And just one final thought on code enforcement is 50% of the people believe that we do not enough, and 50% believe that we do too much. So it's one of those tough areas that I really appreciate these folks' efforts to help get the city cleaned up and keep it cleaned up. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next report will be on building and life safety.
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor. And of course, we've got the fire department who oversee this service. So Mr. Eaton, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Foggin, and thank you, Vice Mayor and Council. One of the things that we had realized after we were assigned this was that we've never came before the council kind of tell you how we're doing since we've brought the building department underneath of us. So it's something we'll do tonight. As you know, the fire department has many different hats that we wear with dispatch, the regular putting out fires and EMS, and along with the building and life safety division, which encompasses our fire prevention division and the safety, the building department. So officially, we took over January 30th of 2017 after probably a year of discussion with former city manager Doherty and the mayor as far as trying to fix some issues and some problems that was going on within that division. With some retirements, it was good timing. So we were asked to take the building the building department, we were asked to take the the building department. Anyway, we did that. We created the Building and Life Safety Division by blending our fire department, fire inspectors, and our building inspectors. We do plan review for the building plan review, commercial, residential, and we also do fire plan review within the department. We also do code enforcement. Like Officer Reif said just a while ago, we work very closely with them. In fact, we've been working very closely with all the divisions and all the departments within the city because we all intertwine. And recently we started having our first of monthly or meetings that we can get together, go over some issues. There's some issues that Neighborhood Services has with our building that's going on somewhere. We go back and forth, and actually today, that case about the driver driving up on rock, that was landscaping rock that was out in front of a home being built. So we have the ability to communicate with all of our builders at once. So we sent out an email. Basically, here's the code. You do have the opportunity, you do have the chance that you're going to be cited for these kind of things. So we need to make sure that we all work together to do that. So the abatement program, specifically under us, we manage the building abatement program and the building abatement budget that we tear buildings down. It is a process that we go through with the city attorney, as long with the divisions. It's a rather lengthy process. We do tear down buildings after we go through the processes and get court approval on that. We do abate buildings, and we actually have 3 right now that's kind of in the queue that we're working through that process. You know, as Carl will attest, it's not a fast, easy process to get through. We also don't want to jeopardize the rights of the homeowners, and we go through that process. We also, as part of our inspections, we inspect the business licenses along with other departments and approve. Construction inspections, we also do our fire inspections. So any business owners, you'll see us at least once a year with our license or our inspections. One of the things that we wanted and we were directed to change was the culture, the service culture of the building department. We needed to become more of a customer service based group, and very proud that we are a customer service based group. And so it was kind of a little bit of a different way of thinking than in the past. What we were able to do with blending these is we've increased the blending and the training to have more efficient operations. So for instance, we now have 6 building and life safety inspectors instead of 3 building inspectors, 3 fire inspectors. That's going to be good, and that'll be good in the times when things really get going crazy. We hope that when we need more building inspectors, we already have them. They're blended, so that hopefully doesn't require any further personnel or anything on that. So it's something that's been very effective. Part of the problem, or part of the thing, was the past is the past. We picked up and moved from what used to be the building department and the building department's way of thinking, the building department's thought process, the building department's code interpretation. We moved past that and into our own. Like I say, officially January the 30th. When we first started this discussion, we were discussing a one-stop shop, and Mayor and former city manager was part of that, was part of the thinking, and the council that was on during that time. Basically, that a person could come in one place and they could talk to the fire, the building department, planning and zoning, engineering. Until we have a building that we can all be in, we're pretty close to that right now. Our physical proximity to each other, obviously the building and fire reside in the same building very tightly, but we get it done. We're right next to engineering, and we're right across the street from planning and zoning. So we do this often, almost daily, is call up one another, hey, can you come over real quick? We've got a customer here. So we're able to at least expedite those kind of customer service interactions. One of the things that we talked about, and we have the powerhouse on here, was at one time the possibility of having a point of contact at the powerhouse for the building community. People coming into the powerhouse from out of town, wanting to build here, wanting to move their commercial business here, that we could possibly have, more of a time. The other thing was the implementation of the pre-submittal meeting. One of the things that we found after we first took over and we were actually surveying the contractors and people that were involved in projects was there was a lot of, I wish I would have known this. By the time we got to the end of a project, things were coming up. It was like, well, I wish I'd have known this. Or we were saying that as well. I wish we knew that you were doing this. And one thing that we had found that we would start doing a pre-submittal meeting. So we would request that if you're going to do a commercial project in the city, we want to meet with you first. And we sat around our table with all the departments, and we basically, they give us their project, and this is kind of what we're going to do. And then we go over with asking questions. And that works. Now, we also put a little bit of a deal on there. This is a requirement. If you don't want to do that, then I've got a paper that you can sign that says that you don't want to do this. And then, so with the lack of not sounding smart, Alec, but had you had this meeting, we wouldn't have been having these kind of problems. Nobody has elected to sign that and not have that meeting. So that's been huge. The other thing is with our customer expectations. What our customers expect out of us. Dreading coming down to the building department. We don't want to go down there. It's going to take forever. I don't want to go down there and argue. And that's one of the things that we had to look at also. Efficiency and then clear communication. It goes back into the communication between the public, ourselves, what's expected out of each, and the contractors. And then we also had the city of Kingman's expectations, your expectations of us and what's required. The other thing that we had to interact and try to fix and solve is the conflict and the complaints that we had in the past. Why were we having those? So we did that, and we'll touch on a little bit. Our organizational structure, I oversee the division. Mike Darlington is our building official that we've just hired. Mike is in, I would say, an intense training opportunities right now. He's out in the field a lot and then getting to know the city and stuff. Dave Lash is our commercial plans examiner, commercial inspections. Dave came over with us, came over with the building department. He was there. Dan Dill is one of our building and life safety inspectors. Oscar Lopez, Mac Nelson, Mike Schmidt, and Sean Osterman, they're all of our building and life safety inspectors. Those inspectors also, they blend back and forth between fire, public education, and building. And then Sherry, Six-Killer Wing, come over as our permit tech. She also came over from the building department. So those are the only two that came over that's still with us outside of retirement or something. So the performance measures that we were able to take care of was we were fire chief, the assistant chief, and then it went down to battalion chiefs. What we found is that we wanted to split it back up into 2 assistant chiefs, which you guys had agreed to in the last budget, to do that, to where I'm assistant chief over building life safety, and then we have an assistant chief over operations. Successful implementation, the branding, that's a big deal for us. January 30th, all the trucks had said building and life safety on it, the business cards, the uniforms. We're very uniform. We don't go out. Everybody doesn't have a different uniform. We're uniform. So that's where the fire department part comes in. An evaluation of all the present policies and processes. What you get with another set of eyes or new set of eyes is taking a look at those processes and why we do that. A lot of those questions were answered is because we've always done it that way, which is it was terrible. That's not a good way to do it. But there's some things there. It's always been done that way because that's the right thing to do. And so that's what we've done. The valuation of day-to-day operations and job duties. We took and turned it upside down. I do this, and I do this. No, you do this, and then we do this, and take it around. Another way for another set of eyes to take a look at it. One of the things that we are most proud of, and we're getting ready to go live with, is the implementation of electronic inspections and access. So our Track It system, I don't know if you're familiar with it, is what we use intra-city to connect all the departments when we do permits and things. What we've done now is that each one of the inspectors has a computer. They're able to log in their inspections out in the field. So that is a quicker turnaround. Say we do a final on a home. We do the final out there. What's going to happen is that builder or whoever the designee is will get an email immediately. It says, your final was just approved. With the builders building all over the city back and forth and busy, they can just simply get an email that says this is done, or your framing is done, now I can order the drywaller. So that's one thing. The other thing with the electronic age is electronic plan submittal. And we're already working with that. So where contractors are submitting plans electronically, we're reviewing them electronically and send them back if there's markups or anything else. And that keeps them from having to get in their vehicle, come downtown. It lightens up the door load, which we have a lot of people in and out throughout the day. And it makes everybody fully aware of what they're putting in. And we should be going live with that within the next couple weeks. And then we'll actually have some trainings. The continued performance measures, ease of access to all personnel. You walk in the front door, you've got whoever you want to talk to, or we can get you there. Providing customers with consistency, accountability, and solutions. One of the things that we probably differ is the way we interpret the code. I am an intent of the code person. Code is not black and white. The same code read here does not necessarily work the same in New York or wherever. The code gives us the ability to work with that and to work with people. And the customer service part of it is just that. And you would agree that consistency and accountability, if you have those two things, you really don't have a lot of problems, as long as you're making one guy do the same as the other one down the road. I'll just go down through this a little bit because we have talked. Outreach to developers, I think all of you probably have experienced that at one time or another, how the new outreach with the developers, with Gary and his department and the way we're reaching out. Our special coordination with planning and zoning is working out, streamlining the process that we just discussed before. Better use of the existing building plan. One of the complaints that we were getting, and during the survey of downtown merchants specifically, was making these old buildings apply to a new code. And we've always had the existing building code, which is designed for that, to be able to use in existing older buildings. That we're able to apply that differently. That's the kind of thing. And common sense. That's something that's sometimes hard to come by, but we like to believe that we use a lot of common sense. I get it. It just doesn't work this way. And we work with the builders, and hopefully you guys are hearing that as well. The other thing that we do is a periodic review. We've had 2 meetings with builders after we began this to get their input. The second one was hardly any builders there, which you could say it's either good or bad, but there was nobody there to complain. So it actually worked out pretty good. So either way, we did that. And finally, I just want to go over kind of by the numbers a little bit, kind of where we're at with our permits. First, you'll see our permit valuations. So these are what the permit valuation is when people pull the permit. Where we were at in 17 was almost 54.5 million. 2018, we're up with our commercial valuations, and we're up about 6.7%, 6.5%. Residentially, we are up, as you could imagine. Not a great deal, from 392 to 416 permits that were issued to the same time last year. One of the other things I want to do, the main thing here, I wanted to let you know kind of where we were with the fee waiver that you guys had instituted in April, to try to give you an idea where we're at with that. The update, of course, that began on April 9th through September 30th. We have waived a little over $73,000 in permit fees. So that has, and it's kind of about where we thought it was going to be. With the projection of this original ordinance ends June 30th of 19, and we're estimating that to be about $180,000 that will be waived during this time period of this commercial. One of the things that you will see is that our commercial permits are actually down this year as opposed to last. And I've been asked many times that why we're waiving this. It's not spurring the business. We have quite a few people that come in that are taking advantage of it. And we kind of thought that was going to happen that year 2 or 3, if they're still waiving, is when you're going to see the people that have been planning. The hotels that we're building right now have been in the planning process for a couple years. So this is a great bonus for them. Nobody ever says that they hate it when they come and pull it. But it gives you kind of an idea where we're at with that fee waiver portion. With that, I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Questions?
I have one. Regarding the fee waiver then, the thought amongst the department personnel is that for that to be effective in the motivation that the council had with extending that is that would probably have to be carried on for another year or 2 to spur the development that was hoped for.
That's correct. And if you think about it, because there are in the hotels that we're getting, so the large projects, the hospital project has come through since then. A couple big hospital projects, the hotels, those have been in research and development for some time, getting to this point. There are people that do call and ask if it's going to be extended, if we're thinking it's going to be extended, because now they're in their research and development are researching that, whether they can come. And these are large amounts for a hotel, or for large projects. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much for the information. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Keith. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
They're doing a great job. I think as far as reputation and quality of work, I'd put our inspection department up against anybody. So appreciate the effort.
Well, thank you. I am aware that this cross-training seems to have been very effective and efficient for the city, so really appreciate all the efforts that are being made. Okay, the next session is fiscal year 2018 financial review. Ms. Moline.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor Miles and council members. So tonight, I am going to provide you a very brief fiscal year 18 financial review. And the purpose of tonight's item is so that we can look quickly at our TPT collection history and our state shared revenue history, and then to look at some of our major operating funds, their revenues and their expenditures, and then some of the highlights, and then a few other highlights on some other funds, just to quickly touch on those. So the funds that we're going to actually report on operationally will be the general fund, HURF, water operating, wastewater operating, and sanitation. When we look at our 3-year TPT collections year over the last 3 years, you'll see that our actuals and our fiscal year 18 figures are actually pre-audit figures at this point. But when we look at our actuals for fiscal year 16 to 17, you'll notice that there is a 6% increase. Now, I did provide budget numbers on here, but I'm not going to touch on those. I'm just going to touch on the actuals. And then when we look at 17 to 18 and we exclude the additional 1% TPT, it's a 3.9% increase. And I want to touch on that just real fast as we move through this report. There's a reason why it looks like it's down from last year. So for years, the Department of Revenue reported to us and sent us our collections very late, 2 months always behind. However, over the last year or so, they've gotten better at that, but we did not change the way that we were reporting our revenues. And so going into this fiscal year 19, we've got to change at some point. And so we went to our auditors and asked them, can we go ahead and make those adjustments? We need to get back on track with the Department of Revenue. And they said, absolutely, but we need to do it in fiscal year 18 since the books haven't closed. So anytime you make an adjustment, it's either going to have a positive or a negative impact on the year that you're making the adjustment. So it looks like we're only up 3.9%. However, if we were to continue to report the way that we've always been reporting, we would be up about 6% again. So just so you're aware. And then fiscal year 19 will look better, hopefully, if we continue on these trends. So anyhow, and then when we take into consideration the 1%, we're way up, of course, 27%. Looking at our state shared revenue history, we have two different funds that receive state shared revenues. Our general fund, and you'll see for the last 3 years that we are noticing some increase in our state shared revenues of close to 4%. Our HURF fund also receives state shared revenues, and you'll notice that those state shared revenues are actually up anywhere from 5 to more than 6%. One of the major reasons for that, why that particular state shared revenue source is up, is that the state of Arizona has said, we're going to continue to just give you your normal distribution based on your population. However, over the last few years, they've said we're also going to give you a one-time annual payment to kind of make up for all of those monies that we've taken over the years. And so that's about $100,000 to us. So that's why you'll notice the larger increase in the HURF revenue, state shared versus general fund. So looking at our largest operating fund, which is the general fund, the revenue highlights. We know our TPT collections are up, our state shared revenues are up, building permit fees are up, business license fees are up, and our investment earnings more than doubled to $94,000 this year in the general fund. Then looking at our expenditure highlights, we actually budgeted about $6.6 million in transfers. One of those transfers was a transfer to the streets fund of about $3.3 million, and that was all based on whether or not the 0.5% for pavement preservation was going to get approved. Since it got approved, we didn't have to make as large of a transfer on that. So we actually only transferred out $3.8 million across the board to all of the funds. So there was a decrease in expected expenditures there. And then we recognized $2.15 million less in personnel costs in the general fund, and that was primarily because our public safety departments had quite a few vacancies this year, and they were not able to fill them. So that was the major reason for that. And then we added our economic development department, but didn't really establish it until much later in the fiscal year. So we ended up adding $677,325 to our general fund balance this year. So we ended up with $18.579 million at the end of fiscal year 18. Again, pre-audit figures that shouldn't adjust much, though, if there are any. So looking at the revenues and expenditures just real quick, from fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 18, there was an increase of 4.2%. Most of the broad categories did experience an increase. And then in our expenditures, you'll see that there was an actual increase of 13.1% since fiscal year 17. But that had to do with the large number of transfers primarily, strictly due to those transfers. So if we were to back those back off, it would not have been such a large increase in our expenditures. So then moving on to our HURF fund. Well, our HURF fund has only a few revenue sources, and those are identified in the pie chart at the very bottom of the screen. But as I stated earlier, our state shared highway user fuel tax was up 5%, and our restaurant and bar TPT increased almost 13%. However, that's part of that adjustment. That's one of those categories that actually recognized a positive impact. So I wouldn't expect that going forward. We're not recognizing that sort of increase in activity. And then our expenditure highlights, really great highlight. Normally you don't want to see increased spending in departments, but for this particular one, this is a really big deal. We increased our pavement preservation spending by 42.9%. 2.9% this fiscal year to $2.15 million. Ended up with an ending fund balance of just over $2 million. We only slightly added to that fund balance this year, so there's not much of a change from fiscal year 17. So the water operating fund, well, we increased our customer base by 3.4%. So we now have 19,951 customers, or as of June 30th of 2018. I wanted to put the revenues chart on here for a reason, and you'll notice that even though year over year we are adding customers to our water system, our revenues barely increase. And any time that we are providing more services or providing more services to more customers or providing to more customers, our costs are also going to increase. So we're not able to keep up with the cost of just providing general operating, the operations of the water system. Hence the reason why we have been working on a water rate increase, and that in the next few months we'll be bringing a notice of intent to adopt some sort of increase in the future. So we were able to add money, or add to our fund balance this year, just $678,000. However, that isn't typical. The last couple of years we haven't added. Again, the only reason we added this year was because of some vacancies in the department, and there was a large capital item that was ended up not being purchased, and so it carried over into fiscal year 19. If that item would have been purchased and we would have had full staff, we probably would not have added anything to the fund balance. So ended up with $5.23 million in the water operating fund's fund balance. Looking at our wastewater operating fund, we added just over, 3.8% customers this year, so that's fantastic. We're at 10,608 customers for our wastewater system. Unfortunately, those weren't all voluntary connections. Most of them were because of the growth in the community, but that's fantastic. The wastewater system, we talk about that every single year. We ended up adding about $1.57 million to the fund balance. Pushing it to $11.14 million. However, most of those monies, depending on the projects that we have funded, end up getting transferred into the wastewater capital projects fund. So they don't just sit in that operating fund. They get utilized for capital projects. And then looking at our sanitation fund, this fund also, we added about 3% in customers this year, and we've noticed that similar growth, but it's very similar to the water operating fund, where our revenues do not meet our increased expenses. And you'll see that the fund balance actually this year we depleted by about $200,000. And as we talked about during fiscal year 19's budget work sessions, the only way we're able to fund sanitation trucks and capital is through the use of our fund balance. Well, if it continues to deplete, we're not going to be able to purchase that capital. So we are looking at conducting some sort of sanitation rate study, or coming up with some sort of fix for this to bring to you. So just so you're aware of the sanitation fund's operations. So then just some other quick fund highlights. So the Powerhouse Fund, I thought it was just a really great fact and a great highlight, is that their merchandise sales were up 41% this year. Last year they were about $135,000, and now they're $190,000 at the end of fiscal year 18. And that is important because the more merchandise they're selling, the less reliance on those tourism dollars that they need to operate their department. So that's a really great thing. Airport Fund. I don't have a lot of data on it. We are still working through the transactional history, and we'll have more in the next few weeks. But it is an important fund that was created during fiscal year 18, an important department that was created. I just don't have all of the figures, but I wanted to mention it. And then we have our I-11 East Kingman Connection Project Fund and our Pavement Preservation Fund. So each of these funds collected total TPT collections of just over $2.05 million. Again, because of that adjustment that we're making in 18, these two funds also benefited from that adjustment. And so the fund balance at the end of the year for the I-11 East Kingman Connection Project Fund ended up with $4.597 million, and our Pavement Preservation Fund ended up with $1.361 million. So quick fiscal year 2018 wrap up. Well, our TPT collections exceeded what our normal 2.75% estimate is, and that excludes the 1% TPT. Our state shared revenues are gradually increasing, and they're increasing across the board. And then what does our local economy look like? Well, it's growing steadily. So the new single family residential building permits were up 31%. Now this is fiscal year over fiscal year, and this is not every residential permit. This is just the SFR. ours, but they're up 31%. And then looking at new commercial building permits, they were up 300% fiscal year to fiscal year. Our business licenses are up over 8%. So at the end of fiscal year 18, we had 1,803 active business licenses. They're up to 1,951 at the end of 18. And anytime that we've got growth, so residential permits, commercial building permits, we're of course going to be increasing our water, wastewater, and sanitation customer base too. So a pretty good year at not a serious incline, but a really good steady incline for us. So with that, I will try to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Questions? No questions.
Okay, great.
Oh,
Thank you
Sorry.
very much.
Yes,
Councilman Yocum.
I have a couple. If you could go back 3 or 4 slides to the HURF highlights. The expenditure highlights, pavement preservation spending up 42.9%. That is that taking into account the monies received from the state, which have been being kept by the state in order for the state to balance its own budget for the last decade or so since the economic downturn, or does that factor in the 0.5% that this council voted to devote to street projects or pavement and street repair and maintenance?
Most of that increase is because of the additional tax that we received for pavement preservation.
So the state is still essentially keeping the HURF monies, which Highway User Revenue Fund money from the state gas tax.
That's correct. They still, I believe it's $90 million or so that they are keeping to themselves and not distributing to the cities.
So without that money, our street projects will pretty much come to a halt. I mean, without the 0.5% TPT or transaction privilege tax, the sales tax that this council enacted.
I wouldn't say it would come to a halt, but it would go back to those average limits of or average spending of about $800,000 per year.
Thank you. I have heard constituents ask, well, why don't we, instead of this sales tax, enact a municipal gas tax? I've heard that question routinely. That, by state statute, is prohibited from being done on a municipal level. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
So the city can't enact a gas tax in order to pay for these streets. And the city is basically completely dependent without having a municipal property tax. We do have a property tax, but it all goes to the county and state. But without a municipal property tax, the only source of revenue, 84% of our revenue, comes from the sales tax.
So for the HURF, most of it is state shared revenues at this point, and then we've been able to contribute because of the 0.5% in pavement preservation sales tax.
Right, but the city is dependent on the sales tax.
Overall.
We have no other, 84%. We have no other basically very little other revenue coming in.
Overall, you're correct. Yep.
Okay. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Mullane.
Vice Mayor Miles, I might have
Oh,
just
I'm
one
sorry.
question, if I may.
Sorry, Council.
Great report, as always, Tina.
Thank you.
In your past quarterly reporting, you had shown a slide, which I didn't see tonight, where it was types of goods, vehicles and auto parts, large durable goods. Do you know if this quarter, are those suffering at all, those sectors, or are they still, year over year, are they still okay?
So we only have 2 months of those reports, and that was actually, I was supposed to report on the first quarter of 19 as well, but I don't have 3 months of data, so I'll have that to you for
Well, that
next
makes
month.
sense. Great, thanks.
Yep, you're welcome.
I just had a.
Oh, go ahead, please.
I apologize. I just had a quick question, Tina. This information that you've provided is very helpful, Is it available to the public? And if so, can you explain how they can access it?
Sure, I can. First of all, it's always available if you just call, but however, we can certainly post it on our website on the finance department page, the link for finance, and we've got a section there for reports, and it would be at the very bottom of that page under reports, and we can post that, and I'll get that taken care of and get with Joe and his team and see how quickly we can get that posted this week.
Perfect, thank
Okay,
you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Miles, for Manager Foggin, our news page on the city's website is some of these presentations that the professional staff are giving. Is that something that would be worthy of maybe posting onto the news page?
Absolutely. Yep, no problem. We can do it there too. Multiple places to find the same information is always helpful for people, so happy to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Okay. We have 2 more reports, and the next one will be the Cultural Event Group.
Yes, and this is just really quick. There's been a group that formed that came together in an effort to try to promote culture and civility within our community, and really thought that the idea of having an event where brought different cultures together within our community would be helpful to be able to recognize diversity. And I just wanted to report that those folks have been coming together and working hard to decide on what kind of event that would be. And in doing so, we've also had them working on an event that I want to make sure that everybody knows about and gets an opportunity to participate in if they would like to, and that is there's a documentary filmmaker that wants to show a movie in our community, and he, along with his marketing team, are working with this group to bring this to Kingman for November 3rd, and that is going to be, it's by invitation only, it's free, but will be available if you sign up, first come, first serve, and it will be, we're still trying to identify a location for them to do this. Looks like it will be one of the high schools, but it will run from 2:30 to 5:30, and the documentary filmmaker will actually be there in attendance and do a Q&A afterwards, and of course, in an effort to promote civility and diversity within our community and cultural awareness. So just want to make sure that everybody recognizes that. Any questions?
Manager Foggin, you said it's invitation only. Is this, will we all be receiving invitations?
Yes.
Will the public?
Yep.
Will groups
Yeah, and
be-
we will post it once the invitation hasn't been finalized yet because they're still working on location. And so as soon as that's done, you will see it pop up. It will be specifically sent to many stakeholders' emails, but it will be part of a couple of different places of advertisement with posters and that kind of thing as well.
Are there any other questions?
Vice Mayor, I do have one question for Mr. Foggin. The filmmaker had requested a community roundtable or question and answer. Has the group made a decision on that?
There's not been a decision. We're hoping that they'll make a decision this Thursday night to see if there's interest in having that panel discussion. So
The filmmaker has requested it.
would like it, but
Right.
that may not occur depending on the group's ability to find folks to serve on the panel.
The city's willing to do that if the right, or as many folks are found that the filmmaker is requesting?
We've just been trying to provide any assistance we can. We've not actually been looking. The filmmaker has indicated that they're willing to do, that he's willing to do straight up just question and answer and forgo the panel if that doesn't come to fruition. So,
Thank
but they
you.
are working on it.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Okay, we're on to Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you. Opportunity Zone update.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Miles, members of the council. I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm either getting a cold or having one great allergy attack, so if I start to hack a little bit, please accept my apologies. I'm going to give you just a brief snapshot this evening of the opportunity zones and kind of where it stands today. On September 27th, Bennett Bradley and I went down to Phoenix, and there was a conference put on by the Arizona Commerce Authority and a group called the CDFA, which is the Council of Development Finance Agencies. There were some 375 of us in attendance, and we spent a good 8 hours at the ASU campus. I have to say, one of the funny things at this meeting was they gave us these directions which everybody put into their GPS, which led everybody to a garage. And so the council, the whole thing started a little bit late, but so we were all walking from the garage trying to figure out where this meeting was going to be at. But I'm going to give you just a snapshot of kind of where it stands and then kind of tell you what some of the future stuff that we're doing. This came right out of the meeting. Regulation and timing, forecasting and guessing when the regulations will come out seem to be one of the most favorite subjects. The bottom line is that the regulations will be out when they come out, and all we can really do is wait because the Treasury Department has not issued the final regs on this. Regulation content, another favorite subject was the forecasting, i.e. the guessing what the regulations will say on the really significant unknowns such as how debt will be treated, and that was really an important one. It's not possible to make the educated guesses, so we need to just kind of wait and just see that part of it out. Attendance, I will tell you that the group was made up of an abundance of economic developers, accountants, a lot of attorneys, and the speakers that were really impressive came from groups like Caliber Realty Group and Virtual Capital. Both of these groups have started setting or already have set up opportunity funds in preparation of when the regulations finally come down from the Treasury Department. And I'll expound a little bit later on what we're going to do along these lines. There is also a potential for market imbalance. The topic of discussion was that there may be a market imbalance with regards to the amount of capital that wants to participate in the program, outnumbering, believe it or not, the number of viable projects that fit the requirements of the capital. The imbalance could be a result of a number of factors: marketing reach of the organizers, repetitive interest in the opportunity zones, and these are people with projects in the opportunity zones typically would expect to do only one opportunity fund deal. Level of awareness about the legislation that still is rolling out. It's going to come in waves, the waves of deals. One pretty good conclusion coming out of the conference is that the opportunity transactions will happen in waves. The first wave will happen over the next 12 months and consume the opportunity projects that were in the pipeline when the legislation came through. The deals that were made since the Opportunity Fund incentives. The second wave will be similar in size and consume the low-hanging fruit of additional projects in the opportunity zones, deals that are obvious but need the financial boost of the Opportunity Fund incentives to move forward. Then everything will just kind of taper off after that. So this is probably a 3 or 4 year program when they finally shake it out. These are the steps that we're doing right now. We've already been in contact with the company of Snell and Wilmer out of Phoenix to discuss how these opportunity funds are being set up and the practices for cities that will want to participate in taking advantage of the opportunity zones. They are very active in new market tax structure deals, and they are now actively working with groups looking to set up opportunity funds, including setting up things like Caliber Realty Group's funds, who were really was one of the primary speakers at the event. So we have set this phone call there. We are waiting on their return call now it looks like it's either at the end of the month or the very first week in November. And one of the things that we'd like to suggest is possibly on this particular conference call is to include one of you council folks and also to include one of the members of the Economic Development Commission. So we think that might be beneficial because sometimes it may be a little bit more helpful to you if that information begins to come right straight from these organizations. So that's kind of where it stands. So just as soon as we have a confirmation from Snelling and Wilmer, we will certainly let Mr. Foggin know, and then he can, address which one of you from the council might like to be in on that call. So that's kind of where it stands right now. One of the things I have to tell you that was interesting, and there was almost quite of a sigh in the group, is that a lot of folks even came to this meeting with the assumption that if they invested in an opportunity zone, that they would have all their capital gains forgiven on that piece, which is not the case at all. You will take, for example, if you had 20 million and you 10 million of its capital gains, you could invest that in the group, or in the opportunity, the 10 million. If you run it out the full 10 years, you'll pay 85% of what you would have paid in capital gains, but you will pay no taxes on what you managed to grow during that time on the money sitting in that opportunity zone. So a lot of folks were I think some folks were just taken back because, really thought, wow, this is the deal of a lifetime. I can just push that out there. So what you're really doing is just pushing it out in increments, and they have 5 and 7 and then 10-year increments. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions, but I just wanted to give you a snapshot, and we have already set up a couple of meetings. We met today, or we had a conference call with a developer who was interested in the opportunity zones. We also have referred one of our smaller clients directly to one of these companies on the opportunity zone, because in their case it's kind of small potatoes, but they said they would take a look at it because it may be a way for him to capitalize his project. But so far, of the 2 larger firms that Bennett and I have been dealing with, they've all expressed an interest, so we're making sure they have that clarity, even to the point of making sure they have the right contact in the ACA to talk with them. So I'll certainly open it up to any questions with that. So sorry it's brief, but I think that one of the things we'd also like to do is to bring back, these experts from Snell, for an example, to really put the feet on the ground. So
That sounds great. Councilwoman Staley?
So I've been researching some of these tax breaks and how this will work. And I've noticed that there's some fund managers that are putting together investments. And did you get a sense of what their long-term plan is? Because this is a long-term investment. What their plan is once they make their investment? Will they just buy the bare land and then hold on to it for 10 years and it'll stay, and then they'll sell in order to put off paying those capital gains and to get the tax breaks? Or do we think that we're going to see more developers utilizing this as a way of cutting their costs and getting more of a bang for their buck?
yeah, I think it's really the second one. It's really not based on speculation.
Okay.
So things have to happen. Otherwise, I think that the opportunity fund would have been foolish. And for anybody who's been in the business for a while, we'd have been back to the old enterprise zones. So this was really designed as a real stimulus, and for the industry, because the return has to come, and it's not going to come on spec property. So.
Good. That's what I was hoping you were going to say. Because as I started looking into it, I thought we don't want people to just buy up the land and then not use it, and then 10 years sell it, and then what? So I'm glad to hear that.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Lingenfelter?
Yeah, well, this is a really exciting opportunity, I think, for Kingman as far as, I'll call it an economic development incentive. And in my research, there are firms that are out there creating these funds. They're waiting for the Treasury to come out with their rules. I'd really like to see Kingman be proactive, get ahead of the game, and if we can have this meeting that you're talking about, maybe find one of these firms that creates these funds. I think there's a real opportunity here for us to work with somebody like that to create almost like a fund prospectus, or a couple of fund prospectus, one for the phase 2 of the airport industrial park, right? So we're doing the airport master plan revision that hopefully should be done by the end of next year. We're going to need infrastructure in there. We're going to need, all of that infrastructure. That's a great, opportunity zone fund type of an opportunity right there. I'd see another one at Kingman Crossing. Nobody knows what's going to happen in 3 weeks when we have an election, but the Opportunity Zone Fund, at least on the south side, if everything goes well, would be a great opportunity to have projects, specific projects on the south side, the city-owned side. You know, you could offer it up as a part of whatever you do. And then maybe for the infrastructure too, if we have to. You never know. But I'm glad to see that we're moving forward with this. And hopefully we come out, you know, very aggressive to try to leverage this for the city of Kingman.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
I just had
Thank you.
one. Have they put out the proposed rulemaking at all?
I'm sorry?
Has the Treasury Department put out a proposed rulemaking?
No, they're just, it was really kind of sad because it would have been really nice at this meeting with all the horsepower that was there. So that's what they're waiting on. They're gathering the funds, you know, and preparing it. So that's the one thing we did ask Snell and Wilmer about, and that is specifically, and that was municipal projects. And so, you know, that'll all be part of the discussion. But it'll be in abeyance till they lay down the final rulings. Almost got ahead of themselves on this one, I think, so.
But it's still a good opportunity,
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely.
for us
So,
to move
yeah,
forward as
start
was
stockpiling
being
the money.
discussed. That's wonderful. Okay. Any other comments?
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Kellogg. Okay. Any other comments, City Manager? With that, I think that the work session is complete, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn for 4 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We'll reconvene in 4 minutes for the regular meeting. Okay, ready? Perfect timing. I'd like to call this meeting of the regular meeting of the City Council to order. We've already had roll call, so I would ask that Pastor Ron Dupree lead us in an invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I bring Pastor Dupre's apology. He got called away to Michigan. I'm an elder from the Adventist Church, and we thank you for this opportunity to be here.
Thank you.
Shall we pray? Our holy God, our Father in heaven, thank you, Lord, for the blessings of another day. Thank you for the opportunities you provide individually and corporately. As the City Council meets here this evening, we ask for your continued blessing on the City of Kingman. We pray specifically for each of our council members and their staff. We thank you for our city government, including each employee and every agency within our city. Thank you for their dedication and perseverance in serving the needs of all our citizens that come to them for service and information. Tonight, Lord, as this august body meets to consider the current and future needs of our community, we ask that you provide through them leadership, patience, wisdom in every issue that they undertake and consider tonight. Thank you for your presence. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The council may go into executive session for legal counsel in accordance with ARS 38431 to discuss any agenda item. The following items may be discussed, considered, and decisions made relating thereto. At this time, I would move forward to the approval of minutes for the regular meeting minutes of 9/4/2018.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, now we move to call to the public, comments from the public. Those wishing to address the council should fill out request forms in advance. Action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or rescheduling the matter for consideration and decision at a later time. Comments from the public will be restricted to items not on the agenda, with the exception of those on the consent agenda. There will be no comments allowed that advertise for a particular person or group. Comments should be limited to no longer than 3 minutes. Cindy, was this for the public comment? Okay, we have one person who has signed up for the public comment. That is Stephen Robinson. Please come forward.
Mayor-elect, City Council and staff, I'm Stephen Robinson. About a month and a half ago, I spoke to you about the election issue. Since that time, the courts have ruled, and even just before, that twice the council and city have been in violation of state law. Again, allowing write-in candidates for this upcoming election violates 9-821.01, which says the top 4 candidates shall be the only ones for those office in a runoff or general election. The odds of a write-in candidate winning is very slim to almost none, but I think the point is, I would recommend you do one thing. You ask the Attorney General's office for an opinion to make sure that allowing write-in candidates, which the general rule makes sense, but it doesn't apply in this case, and I would encourage you to do a request to the Attorney General's office for an opinion. I started studying the budget and the finances of the city, in brief, because I haven't had much time worrying about elections. What I found out was kind of surprising. One, there is over $5.5 million in the Internal Service Fund. That's a cash reserve that's been carried forward about $4.5 to $5.5 million for the last 5 years. Now, if that's not being counted towards your capital expenditure funds, then something's being wrong, because that's what that money is for buying vehicles. And in fact, the Internal Service Fund is supposed to be a wash. You're not supposed to build up a profit and have cash reserves. It's one department paying another department for services rendered by Department A. The other thing I noticed is that 5 years ago, June 30th, there was $7 million in the cash reserves of the general fund. In 5 years, that fund has grown 140% to $17 million. The problem with government is too much is never enough. You've asked for a sales tax increase. You voted and approved a sales tax increase, all the while building up an additional $10 million in that fund, 140% more than you had. If before you start saying, oh, we need more in reserves, I suggest you look at the GFOA reports and recommendations, because I've been doing that research for several years. And I encourage you to take a look and see if maybe you can use some of that cash instead of taxing the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council? Okay, let us move on to the consent agenda. All matters listed here are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Would any of the council like to remove any of the items? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Old business, golf course manager RFP update. In reviewing the golf course manager request for proposals, a 5-person panel conducted interviews of the 2 candidates. After the interviews and the 5-person panel, each evaluating the proposals of the 2 candidates, staff desires input from council. Staff requires council direction.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Foggin, Manager Foggin.
I just want to kind of walk you through where we are to this point before we move into any kind of recommendation that I may have. We actually had 3 people attend our pre-proposal meeting. Out of those 3, we had 2 that chose to submit an RFP. As mentioned, there were 5 people on the panel. They reviewed the RFPs and interviewed the candidates. And what we were left with after the review and the interviews were that we had one proposer is somewhat inexperienced and appeared to be underfunded, and our second proposer is currently the business owns the contract to operate the pro shop and the concessions or the restaurant. And based on past performance, basically looking over the last 6 years of the contract, there's been a failure to deliver on commitments to market and promote the golf course. That's been addressed several times at the council meeting, as well as a failure to enforce council set rates. And so it literally left us with this quandary of what to recommend moving forward. This is an operational issue, but of course, the council is in need of understanding what's happening. So that's really where we stand right now. What we find ourselves looking at are a couple different options. One is we could try to award the RFP to one of these proposers, and feeling like both had some pros, but the cons. So the scoring for these two RFPs were not very high, and so we could do that. The other thing that we could do is we could go back out for another round of RFPs, extend the existing contract, and see if there's additional interest. Or what we can do is basically bring the golf course operations, clubhouse and restaurant into the full operations of the city. And so I do have a recommendation for you, because in evaluating the process, kind of looking at the history of operations, there seems to be or has been a breakdown between the clubhouse operations and the operations of just the general golf course. And so what I'm recommending as from the operational standpoint, is that we look to absorb the clubhouse operations and the restaurant operations, and we work with the current contract holder to absorb them into the city operations, so that what my hope is that we would be able to work with Levi and his team in making them part of the overall operations of the golf course. We've recently added a superintendent, an assistant superintendent to the operations. That's working out wonderfully. A little bit of backstory is that our assistant superintendent worked with our current contract holder at another golf course, so they're actually pretty familiar with each other. We haven't, of course, sat down and had any conversations with the current contract holder about this. Wanted to talk with the council first on it. The results, I think, that we will have is that the city, if we assume all operations of the golf course, there will be a concerted effort to succeed. We'll all be pulling in the same direction. We will maximize the use of the facility, which I think is extremely important. We will have better customer service throughout the golf experience for all players and people that use the golf course. We will have better communication between all operations. What I've found in my short stint is that we may get complaints in the clubhouse. Those, for one reason or another, don't get passed on, and then the golfers are frustrated, and then we end up with people that are upset with course conditions, and we can do better with communicating with our guests and our golfers. So there's that. Of course, the one thing that we're all very interested in, I know it's been talked about several times, is better marketing and promotion of the golf course and having a larger base of golfers. Of course, that improvement in marketing and promotion will end up increasing revenue. And of course, one of the things that we're working and want to work towards is that we want to have the golf course get as close to break even as we possibly can, recognizing that it is a facility that is designed to improve livability in our community. That doesn't mean that we ignore the opportunities that are there to have it make money. Where we know that our local municipal courses around us have seen increases in revenue, albeit slight. They've seen increases, and over the last number of years, we've actually seen decreases. So, we're looking at this as an opportunity to really revamp and to head in a new direction. Of course, we want to provide uniform and consistent policies and procedures. If we're all working at this together, it seems to me that that is a much easier hill to climb. And the accountability, of course, we're after I've been pushing performance measurements, goal setting for all the divisions of the city. This would give us an opportunity for goal setting in all aspects of the golf course, and performance measurement looks as well. And so, in short, I just think the results of this will be improved experience for everybody that utilizes the golf course, from the time they drive onto the property till the time they drive off. And so that's kind of where we are with the RFP. I'm happy to take questions about that, but that's the direction that I'm leaning towards right now. And as it said, I wasn't kidding when I said I'd like, if there's input, I would want to take that as part of, yes, this is operational. Recognizing that, I think that the council is a vital team member as we move forward, especially in a big operational change like this. So that's what I have for you.
Are there any questions for Manager
Vice
Fargan?
Mayor, I do have a couple, please.
Please.
Mr. Foggin, will there be, I think a significant amount of the problem with the golf course has been that the current contract holder and Mr. Mearsman, one did not report to the other. What is your intent for reporting?
So the reporting would be that the assistant superintendent and the person in charge of the clubhouse will work together as a team, and they will actively report to Mike and ultimately to me.
Okay. And I may have misunderstood you, so if you can just clarify.
Sure.
Did you say that your intent was to look at hiring the existing contract holder as an employee?
And his staff.
They've missed revenue projections significantly.
Well, I recognize
and
that.
I understand it's your purview and your decision.
Well,
That's
and
my only
so
comment.
I guess what I would say to that is, I think that there's some really great experience that we have at the clubhouse, and my thought process was that with help and a different direction. I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, but with team help, that we can actually turn that around, and with the experience of running the clubhouse and the restaurant, as well as some new leadership ideas, that we get kind of the best of both worlds.
And thank you, Vice Mayor. My last question, I promise, is what does Mr. Mearsman recommend? Which of these solutions?
I've talked to Mike a number of times, and he was comfortable with the idea of us basically taking over and running the entire operations of the golf course.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Councilman?
Thank you, Manager Foggin. I had made some notes, and it sounded to me like you had really covered everything. As a city council, I think it's our duty to work with you as our employee, our direct report, to come out with policy outcomes. And you kind of mentioned all of them, I think. The ones that I wrote down were, offer the best player experience as rated by the players. Offer the best possible facilities in the grounds. Operate as close to in the black as possible. You mentioned that. And maximize use of the facilities, which goes back to the marketing, right? And you mentioned performance metrics need to be used to measure progress. I think that we have to give you some room to run, to be the CEO, and so you have my support for that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Other comments, questions?
I just had just a few. One of the things I was going to ask you, but you covered it really nicely, is to list off some of the potential benefits to this proposed option of bringing the golf course under the authority of the city. And you mentioned that we'd be pulling in the same direction, that it would provide a better experience for golfers, better communications, better marketing and promotion, which I know we've had issues with over the last few years, that we'd have uniform policies and procedures, and that some of the issues that we've had so far, promotion and failure to enforce rates and operations breakdown between the city and how it's being run right now. And this potential option, it looks really good to me. I do have a few other questions. You mentioned that surrounding golf courses have seen increases over the years, and one of the things that was a big concern to me, one of the meetings we recently had when we talked about the golf course was that since the recession, our deficit towards the golf course financially has increased over the years, which I don't think should be happening, considering the fact that, people should be golfing more, and, that just shouldn't be how it is. So it's obviously, it can work. And I believe that, I sat in on a bunch of the PARG meetings where this was a huge issue. Promotion came up, or promoting the golf course, and all these things came up. And so that was one of the major issues. But so I guess another thing is or question that I have is, I guess it's a financial question. Do we have any estimates as to, or projections or goals, if we were to bring this under the city financially? I mean, would we be able to, or obviously our goal would be to, start chipping away at that deficit, but do we have any projections? Are there any cities that have done something similar in the past, or?
Well, I can answer that last question the easiest, which
Okay.
is, in looking at this, it's very unusual to have someone contracted to run your pro shop and restaurant, and then you run the operations. So it's a little bit of an odd animal, where you either have someone that runs the entire facility, right, from grounds to the pro shop to the restaurant. So you've got that avenue, or you've got the city just runs it. There is we allowed for, in the RFP, someone to bid individually, because one thing that's not super unusual is to contract with someone to run your restaurant side of it. We didn't have that. We didn't have anybody that took any or provided any interest in just taking on the restaurant side, which isn't a problem. I mean, it's one of those things that is done, in municipal golf courses around the United States. But so that's that piece. I would say that our projections are that we will look at where we currently stand, and my thought process is that our goal would be to end the fiscal year at least up a little bit. But to be able to tell you an exact goal, we have not had that conversation yet. Like I said, this is something that I've talked with Mike and Tina, this idea with Mike and Tina about. They both were supportive of it, and so we've got some work to do as far as setting goals, and what the expectations are with, when the contract ends, we'll have 6 months to the end of the fiscal year to see what promotional and marketing we can do to see if we can't get the revenue up. And like I said, I think with absorbing the current contract holder, we'll be obviously looking for expertise in running the pro shop and the restaurant and looking for best practices in those areas and seeing what we can do to, see increases in sale, pro shop sales. Are there places we can look at there? What is happening on the restaurant side? What can we do there? Because that's the reason to absorb is you've got experience. You're basically adding experience to the team. And like I said, I think it's kind of interesting that you wouldn't form a football team. You wouldn't form a football team and contract with, someone from outside to play a position, right? It just we need to be pulling together, and we need to I think be able to move operationally forward with what the council has envisioned the golf course can be. And that is not to say that it would be a moneymaker. That's not what the council has said. The council has said that they want to see best efforts put forward to market the course, to have it be part of our overall livability, and to really have it be a piece of the puzzle that makes as much money as it can, recognizing that it's not going to be a moneymaker. So, but yeah, setting goals, we have not set goals for it yet.
One of the more compelling benefits that you listed was the increased or better communications, and being at that meeting where we talked about this, the Parks and Rec meetings where we first brought these issues to the golf pro, it was pretty aggravating to watch as fingers were being pointed and there was lack of responsibility being taken or accountability. So I really like this option because, everyone will have uniform policies and procedures. We'll all be on the same page, and there will be no pointing of fingers because it's under one auxiliary. So I like that option.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Councilman?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I'm very appreciative of this coming to council. I'm supportive of it for the sake of control and oversight. We know how much better job it seems like we're able to do in-house rather than having an outside entity with outperformance measures in place, having to answer and uphold their performance measures and the like. We've seen how well it's worked out in the case of the airport, and I'm very appreciative of this coming forward, and I'm supportive of it. Thank you. I appreciate it, this of staff.
Thank you.
I do have one member of the public who has signed up to speak on this issue, Mr. Bill Shade.
Hi, I'm Bill Shade, Kingman resident, also a golfer. I was originally intending to come up here to lay forth more concerns, but this recommendation by our city manager is both pleasing and to the positive. So I'll withhold a lot of those concerns so I can observe how this process here will span out. Certainly, there's a couple of council members. I think you are misinformed with a lot of the prior dealings. Certainly, we, the golfers, we are not opposed to the current contract holder at all. He's treated us fairly. He's charged the city rates, and he does everything within his control to make it a pleasurable experience for us. But he is not under the control, or does not have control of the golf course itself. That is the Parks and Recreations Director and the City of Kingman. So you have a product that is going down because the city will not fund this product well enough. That makes our experience a lot less. So it's very unfair for any council member to think that the current contract holder is not doing his part of the game or the contract. It is certainly, in the golfer's point of view, it's a lacking of the direction of the current Parks and Recreation Director and the city as a whole of not giving the funding to the course to keep it in the great condition it used to be. All right, so certainly, and we the golfers are more than willing to talk more with the council members to enlighten you on further of that viewpoints, right? But very pleased with this latest thought pattern. It seems logical and very reasonable in this situation, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Shade. Okay, you want council direction?
I've
or
got it.
You've
Thank you.
got it? You feel like you have it good?
Yep, thank you.
I will go on record saying I also endorse this holistic approach. I think the split historically has not been really effective, the split of duties. So this sounds like a very promising approach. And I did have one question. Will our new public affairs person be involved in the marketing effort? Because that's certainly been an area that has been we've been talking about for several years.
You absolutely are guaranteed that she will be involved.
Excellent. Thank you. Excellent. New business. Resolution number 5179 designating Native American Indian Heritage Month. A resolution by the Mayor and Common Council of the City of Kingman, Arizona, designating November 1st through November 30th, 2018 as Native American Indian Heritage Month in the City of Kingman. Staff recommends that we adopt Resolution 5179, and I will read that resolution. This is a resolution by the Mayor and Common Council of the City of Kingman, Arizona, designating November 1st, 2018 through November 30th, 2018 as Native American Indian Heritage Month in the City of Kingman. Whereas the City of Kingman, in the heart of the desert Southwest and next to Hualapai Mountains, is deeply rooted in its American Indian heritage and the contributions it has given our community. And whereas we know that as American Indians and Native Americans were the first explorers and settlers of the areas that now make up the United States. And whereas mountains and rivers, lakes and valleys, states and counties, trails and towns across the land bear American Indian names, and they are lasting reminders of the presence and significance of the American Indians, not just in our geography, but throughout the whole of American history. And many of the foods we eat and the medicines and remedies we use were introduced by American Indians. And whereas American Indians make contributions in every area of endeavor and American life, and our literature and all our arts draw upon Indian themes and wisdom, and whereas countless American Indians have served in our armed forces and have fought valiantly for our country, all Americans are grateful for these lasting contributions. Whereas this month we recognize the countless contributions of Native American Indians that help make our nation a thriving, a secure land of opportunity. Now therefore be it resolved, the City Council hereby designates November 1st, 2018 through November 30th, 2018 as Native American Indian Heritage Month in the City of Kingman. And we call upon public officials, educators, librarians, and all Americans to observe this month with appropriate ceremonies, activities, and programs, passed, adopted, and adopted by the Mayor and Common Council this 16th day of October 18. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
Move to adopt Resolution 5179.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Just one to Manager Foggin, if there were any activities that were a part of this that were going to be held that you know of?
And that's actually what we're hoping will happen in the future. I'm not currently aware of any activities. What we did in the last recognition of our Hispanic Heritage Month was that we highlighted, we had a number of employees that they're very important to our operations. We were able to highlight them, and we'll be looking to do that through this month coming up to recognize Native Americans within our area that contribute and have made a big difference. And so the events, I think, will be coming. I know that in our last First Friday, there was some activity that was, I believe it was, remind me, art and music as part of the Walpi Nation. And my hope is that that kind of thing will grow out of this as an actual event that happens during this month. So,
Thank you, sir.
yep.
Any other comments? And I'd call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Department reports.
Yes, we really don't have any department reports, but I do feel necessary to report on the Rancho Santa Fe conversation that we've been involved in. And what I mean by we is my team and I and several of you. And so I just wanted to let everybody know the State Transportation Board will be in Lake Havasu. They will be there, their meeting as a board, October 26th at 9 a.m. They will be at the Lake Havasu Police Facility Meeting Room, and that is, the address for that is 2330 McCulloch Boulevard in, of course, Lake Havasu. I think I got that street name right. And so one of the things that we've been planning for a long time is to have a presentation at the board meeting. And we found out that they frown on that. So we're working a new avenue to be able to talk to the State Transportation Board. And if I jump ahead, it's just to give you some good news. My understanding is that the board will be here in January. They are going to be here January 18th for their board meeting. And as part of those activities, what we're planning on doing is inviting the board to a dinner the 17th in the evening, at which point we will, of course, give them our full presentation and be able to explain the importance of Rancho Santa Fe in great detail. So that's good news. But the reason I bring up the State Transportation Board in Lake Havasu is it's also very close. And what we are trying to do is, and what we've been encouraged to do, is utilize their citizen input section of their meeting to send the message about how important Rancho Santa Fe interchange is to this community. And so if you have time that day, I know that Vice Mayor Miles is planning on attending and giving a little 3-minute or less statement. They have the same rules we do, to tell the board how important it is for Kingman, the region, and the state. And we're also looking for help from any other stakeholders that can make it over there for that meeting. Of course, we will be looking to CAMA. We'll be looking to the county elected officials. We're going to also reach out to our state representatives. My feeling is they'll probably be there at part of the conference, the Rural Transportation Conference. So we're going to be asking them to provide 3-minute statements on their support and the importance of Rancho Santa Fe. And so please add that to your calendar. We're not looking to necessarily say the same thing over and over again, but we do want to send the message in a bunch of different ways of the importance of this interchange and the help and partnership that we need from ADOT. That's what I have on Rancho Santa Fe. I think it's good news all the way around. And just as one final point, we met with our regional representative, Gary Knight, who is, I believe, Vice Mayor of Yuma. Vice Mayor? He holds that role. The title may be a little bit different. Anyway, very receptive to our needs, and he's actually going to come here He liked the conversation so much that he's actually going to visit us and do a site visit to the area, so that he can better envision where this will be located and kind of the impacts, the positive impacts that this interchange will have on the rest of our transportation system and economic development. So anyway, that's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very exciting. So there are no other department reports. Announcements by mayor, council members, and city manager. Are there any announcements?
Planning and zoning had a meeting on the 10th, and it was a very full agenda, and we will be hearing a lot more about the outcome of those agenda items and their very long discussions on them, with a lot of public input.
Good. Thank you.
Nothing this evening.
I have nothing to add, thank you.
I have a couple items. Sorry. Just a couple updates. First, on the 6th, I attended and was the opening speaker at Kingman's first opioid symposium. It was a really great event. I learned so much about what's happening in our community and how our citizens are being impacted and some of the really scary statistics that are out there. So I would encourage everyone to attend the next symposium when they have it planned. It was definitely worth the time and helpful. The other update I have is I did attend the Airport Commission meeting, and we were given a very interesting presentation on the draw site and where it's at, and I know that's been sent out to all the council members, but I would encourage you to look through it. There's some very interesting historic photos inside, and just to let you know where we're at in that process. And we also talked about improvements that are upcoming at the airport. It's all good news, more positive things happening at our airport, and more businesses interested in relocating here, as Bennett loves to deliver the good news about how the phone has been ringing. So those are always great positive meetings to attend. And then the other thing is, I'd like to remind everybody that tomorrow is the Walk Away from Drugs event at Centennial Park. Please don't miss it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a couple
Go
more.
ahead.
Councilmember Staley, you beat me to that one.
I'm sorry.
I have a couple other items in
ahead.
addition to tomorrow's Walk Away from Drugs event. That's 5:30. There are 3 start locations for that, but beginning 5:30.
You remember where they were?
I do.
Okay, could you tell everybody, please?
Smith's, grocery store, Fireman's Memorial Park, and the Harley-Davidson dealership. Each of the 3 start locations, you will walk to the park from, thank you, Centennial Park, yes. Beginning 5:30, and that should probably wrap up evening, 7:30, so something like that. Hot dogs, etc., and some good information. In addition to that, tomorrow is the Tri-City Council meeting. Tomorrow, the quarterly is held in Bullhead Council Chambers. That begins at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. The agenda is principally the regular updates from Mojave County supervisors and reports from the city's mayors, etc. In addition to those 2 items, I also wanted to thank very much the local EAA, that's the Experimental Aircraft Association Chapter 765, as well as, or specifically, its president, Tim Gerlach, and a couple of people who really championed the Airfest assistance he had. Mostly Dave Amspoker, Paul Gaines, in organizing and putting on the Airfest a week and a half ago. So I was out there all day, ended up sunburnt, windburnt, but it was a fantastic event. I think it was very well received by the public, and it's much appreciated by the city. So wanted to thank them very much for that. That's all I have.
Thank you, thank you. And I would just add that I will be also attending the Tri-City Council, and this Saturday we'll be going to Havasu for their London Bridge celebration, because I want to see those sheep running across that bridge. It seems like a lot of fun, but also it's an opportunity to have another meeting and luncheon with the governor and hear from him again. So I think that will be very productive.
Mayor, I've just got a couple things I need to cover as
I'm
well.
sorry, go ahead.
So I appreciate the councilors for taking a few things off mine. I appreciate that. I just want to remind everybody about the new videos that are up on our YouTube channel, and would invite everybody to take a look. These are great videos. They're not going to take much of your time, other than the voter education outreach class that we filmed. That one's a lot longer, but we felt like that was a great way, if people couldn't make one of the classes, that they could still get the flavor of what we were sharing as far as the facts on the 412, Initiative 412 and 413, as well as a great interchange summary, if anybody's interested in both Kingman Crossing and the Rancho Santa Fe. Greg Henry did a great job kind of outlining where we are with those. And then so we have a new general fund revenue video that's up. If you haven't seen that, really great, explaining where revenue comes from for the general fund. And then we have a couple of videos on current projects that are being worked on, actively worked on in the city, the Andy Devine Sidewalk Project, and of course Stockton Hill Water Line Replacement and Pavement Replacement Project as well. And it just spurred my memory to let you all know that the Kingman Crossing agreement, I was contacted by Brian from the hospital and told us that their attorneys were just wrapping up their review of the development agreement, and we should have it sometime this week. So looking forward to continuing working on the interchange. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank you, Manager Foggin, and all the staff who participated in making and creating those videos and all the pamphlets and all the information that is factual, and putting that out into the public. And that type of information is invaluable, and I just encourage everybody in the public to take the time to look at those videos and really, garner the wisdom of all the staff that work with this day in and day out. And I appreciate it very much.
Madam Vice Mayor, if I could briefly
Yes.
go back to the airport, or the Airfest. I apologize, I neglected to thank staff for their support in that event as well. Interim airport manager and city manager, very supportive, and that's much appreciated as well.
Thank you. Council request for future work session agenda items and/or calendar adjustments. Are there any items to be considered for the work session calendar?
Thank you, none from me.
I do have one.
Council.
I'd like for Manager Foggin to put together a work session item to discuss putting together some sort of an ad hoc committee to find out both what we know now and find out exactly what the process is for opening Phase 2 of Kingman's Airport and Industrial Park. Myself and many others have been told that whole process started like 8 or 10 years ago, and yet everybody that I asked today, they still don't have any concrete answers. And it's important because in Phase 1, because we're building a dream team out there, we may not have land soon, right? Within the midterm type, like 5-year period. So we have to make sure that we do what we can now. We need to get exact answers about what it's going to take to open up Phase 2, and we need to get working on it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Staley?
Thanks. I would like to request an item, an update actually, on our trails and what the status is of them, especially after the rains. I know that the loop has been devastated. I'd like to know, first of all, I do know that the city staff's been working very hard to fix that, but I'd like to know if additional funding is going to be needed in order to get those back to a usable condition for everybody, and then whether or not that affected the White Cliffs Trail during the storm. Thank you.
Councilman White? Nothing.
One item, not a work session item specifically, but a general session item, but it would be executive session for the second meeting in November. That would be the 20th of next month. That would be in that we're discussing the city attorney's contract and sort of performance review this evening. The 20th of November would be Manager Foggin's 6-month review. That would be an executive session item for that meeting. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing. We'll move on to the...
Mayor?
Yes,
Vice
sir.
Mayor, sorry.
Yes, sir.
Just wanted to point out, not in relation to Councilor Yoakum's, which is fine, but just wanted to point out to the council, traditionally, I don't know if it's traditionally for the city of Kingman, but the second meeting in November falls on Thanksgiving weekend, or Thanksgiving week. And that, with that, school is out of course, school's out Tuesday afternoon. And so in just an effort to try to promote public participation at your council meetings and not knowing exactly what everybody's travel plans are, just wanted to throw out to the council that you may consider not having the 20th meeting due to the Thanksgiving holiday. And again, that wasn't anything to do with Councilor Stewart's suggestion. So.
No, we can't really discuss it, but we could probably have it on the next agenda item.
Thank you.
Or the next agenda.
Okay.
For discussion.
That would be good. We will have the discussion and vote as to whether to cancel the November 20th meeting on the next agenda. Executive session. Discussion and the evaluation and contract renewal of city attorney. The council may go into executive session pursuant to ARS 38-431 to discuss the evaluation of the city attorney and renew the contract. Discussion and action regarding this. Could I have a motion to go into executive session?
Move to do so.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. entertain motions regarding the renewal of the city attorney.
I'd like to make a first motion that City Council reactivate, what would you call it, the committee that is composed of our city manager and, is it 3 council members?
It was 3,
To,
at least 2.
to meet as required or during, and to work on those process improvements and those working collaborative improvements.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
And who are you going to have on that committee?
Okay. My next question.
Oh, okay.
But thank you. So I heard that the city manager, Thank you. The city manager, and I would ask who else is going to volunteer, I guess, to be on this subcommittee.
David and I are going to volunteer.
Well done. Councilwoman Staley and Councilman Waite are subcommittee members. And I think you said 2 or 3, so barring other volunteers, we would ask them to serve with you. And do we need the
No, I
Okay,
think that's
okay.
But like, maybe
And I,
we're gonna volunteer, so I was.
I'll move to release Mr. Cooper's evaluation, make that a public document.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and second that we release Mr. Cooper's performance evaluation. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we need one more motion.
I'll make a motion to approve Mr. Cooper's contract as discussed.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. We appreciate your work and your continued work with us.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations.
And I would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll
Second.
second. Oh, goodness.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.